That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about City of Lies, directed by Brad Furman, which is being released March 19, 2021, courtesy of Saban Films. And that City of Lies is L.A. This film technically was released in 2018 in several European territories. And
it was released in 2018?
Yes.
Oh.
But it was supposed to be released in the fall of 2018, but there kind of fuzzy information about the reasons for the delays. Some were cited Johnny Depp's legal issues at the time. There's conspiracy theories, I think, about the LAPD trying to suppress it, but also the original backers of the film, like Open Road Films, merged into another company, and Saban Films just bought the rights the first week of March of this year.
This movie is based on a book.
But yes, a 2002 book by Randall Sullivan.
Called LAbyrinth, which I read like 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's an engrossing read because for someone who is very familiar with the murders of Tupac and Biggie, as far as like cultural events, I was not aware of the theories surrounding conspiracy involving the LAPD and covering up the murders. So reading the book, I mean, it was riveting because there are some very bold accusations made. Names are named. So I was surprised that I didn't know more about the story in the book Labyrinth. But the story is, it revolves around the deaths of Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G. Mainly the Notorious B.I.G. because the author of the book, who did extensive research, I guess uncovers the fact that he believes an off-duty LAPD officer who was on the payroll of death row, like he kind of worked as security, was commissioned to kill Christopher Wallace, Biggie Smalls, in retaliation for the death of Tupac Shakur. And the reason the LAPD covered that up is because in the wake of like the Rodney King trial, they felt like if there was a wrongful death suit made against LAPD, it would basically bankrupt LAPD because the Notorious B.I.G.'s earning potential was so high. So it was just covered up. And it remains as an open case because as long as it's under investigation, they cannot be sued for wrongful death and they don't have to release any information. So that's basically the story. And
the assertion is that the Rampart scandal of the late 1990s was merely meant as a cover-up to draw attention away from this case as well.
So the book is very illuminating. The movie is interesting because it kind of works like, I would say it's like 25% documentary.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of like real footage used. They do get access to good music.
Yes.
Like Tupac's and Biggie's music, which is great. Even Voletta Wallace plays herself in the movie.
And she's a producer.
Okay. But the three main players are Johnny Depp, Forrest Whitaker, and Shea Whigham.
I don't know if I'd call Shea a main player.
Well, he's in my mind because those three really derailed the movie for me.
Agreed.
So who does Johnny Depp play?
Johnny Depp plays Russell Poole, who is a detective for the LAPD who... the film goes over how he was basically involved in another case about the shooting of LAPD officer Kevin Gaines, who was shot by Shea Whigham's character, a real-life officer named Frank Lyga, and how that basically the questions he was being asked, because they were a little too uncomfortable, they shoved him over onto the Notorious B.I.G's case, and he ran into this evidence, or what he was following was the fact that LAPD was in bed with Suge Knight and Death Row Records, and so his reputation was derailed. But nearly 20 years later, he's still working on the case, and he is joined by a journalist named Jack Johnson,
Played by
Jack Jackson, played by Forrest Whitaker, who shows up at his apartment, who's basically playing a version of Randall Sullivan. He's this journalist who, in this film, won a Peabody Award for a piece he did on East versus West. And this Jack Jackson's hypothesis was all about Biggie's involvement in putting out the hit on Tupac, which of course was not the case.
I don't know where to begin. Well, let's start on the positive. What did you like about this movie?
Well, I don't know. The subject matter is so compelling, it kind of sells itself.
Yes.
I don't want to say it doesn't matter. The main players kind of detract from the material, but otherwise, I was engrossed throughout.
For sure.
Even though I was annoyed at a lot of the choices being made. But that said, I don't think it's a terrible film, and it's the various reasons for its delay have nothing to do with its quality overall, I think. But the best scene, I thought, is one very small scene between Laurence Mason, who's playing FBI agent Dunton, when he's questioning David Monk, played by Shamier Anderson, who was the cop that had robbed a bank because his girlfriend worked there. To me, that was by far the best scene of the film.
I thought the supporting cast was strong.
Yes.
Obviously, the music adds a lot of, I think, necessary texture to the film. The things that seem kind of off, how do I say this? The movie to me feels like a mess, like it was kind of slapped together, but I think those were intentional choices, and they do work for the most part. I like sort of the blending of like real footage with the narrative feature, but go ahead.
It was shot by Monika Lenkowska, who's a European cinematographer, which I think adds a definite visual edge to this. Previously, she was a cinematographer on Imperial Dreams, starring John Boyega, an Ethiopian film I like called Defret, and a Greek film called Park from 2016. A varied filmography that I think lends kind of a different eye to the city.
Okay, Forrest Whitaker. I mean, he's all right, but in this movie, I feel like he just looks so deflated, and the way he's dressed, like kind of like he's dressed kind of like urban, modern, like chic. It just doesn't suit his sort of like the way he walks around. There are several shots of him like walking and running, and it just looks so awkward. And my very first note is when he gets access or finds Johnny Depp's character and wants to interview him, and he keeps saying, "Tell me who shot Biggie." And I just thought that was like so awkward. Like it was just not well, I don't know, acted, written, whatever. But he says it several times. Tell me who shot Biggie. Like, oh yeah, let me just tell you. Then my next note is, what is Johnny Depp doing?
Playing this martyr that is drawn in the most cliched ways. There's a point because Shea Whigham, his character, that police officer is going to be brought to court for the death of Kevin Gaines, and at the last minute it gets thrown out of court, so that denies the opportunity to get it on record that the LAPD had dirty fingers in here. And it's really awkward scene because Shea Whigham's shouting his line, and then Johnny Depp has this slow pan looking up at the Statue of Justice, who's blind. It's those kind of moments that made it seem laughable.
What I like so much about the book, in addition to information I wasn't aware of, was the description of the city of LA and the places they are. Even the sort of opening of the book is sort of like the opening of the film. It's the officer describing the scene of when the two cops shoot each other, and it was just so like beautifully done. And in this movie, it just I like how the film looked, but I didn't get if it weren't for the fact that it kept saying LAPD and I recognized like landmarks,
the opening scene is good with the car chase between the two cops.
It is, yes, but I think it was, I don't know, I feel like I'm just picking on this movie because those three portrayals from Whigham and Depp and Whitaker are so just corny. Even there's a scene where Johnny Depp's character is trying to reenact the moments leading up to Christopher Wallace being shot, and they have like these Hot Wheel cars and a reproduction of the building they were in, and I thought that was so corny, the way they were doing it.
But there's a few good name drops in there. You get Foxy Brown.
They shout out Foxy Brown and DJ Quick.
An extensive supporting cast of some notables. Glenn Plummer, I kept thinking before I said it as we're watching that, is that Glenn Plummer from Showgirls?
He looks so different. Like something with his teeth looked different to me.
And I don't know if he was made up to
maybe
look rougher on the edges. The screenplay is by Christian Contreras, and he's an actor. This is his first time screenplay, and I think that it paints in cliches quite a bit, which is a detriment to this material. Also, I don't know that Brad Furman it was the best choice for making this, besides Depp and Whitaker. Previously, he's probably best known for The Lincoln Lawyer. At the beginning of the reconnaissance in 2011, and did The Infiltrator with Bryan Cranston, and a film I can't stand called Runner Runner with Ben Affleck and Justin Timberlake.
That makes me think Winner Chicken.
I know, yeah. I kept thinking, F. Gary Gray, who directed Straight Outta Compton and Set It Off, he would have been a better fit for this, and also that the Suge Knight component, because Suge Knight, who of course is currently in prison for running over, what's that man's name? Terry Carson. He killed somebody, he ran them over, and it was caught on film after an altercation on the set of Straight Outta Compton. And during the filming of Straight Outta Compton was also brought up on charges for threatening bodily harm and or death to F. Gary Gray.
Oh, interesting.
That charges that had to be dropped in his manslaughter plea that currently has him imprisoned.
I think what I was trying to say earlier about the description in the book is I think if a person is interested in hip hop or the unsolved murder cases of Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac, then this will be a very interesting movie. But I think if you aren't familiar, then a standalone corrupt cop thriller, it's not very effective.
It needs something like OJ Made in America. We really need to have kind of this greater overview of everything leading up to these assassinations.
Yeah.
And the climate of the time, and even the Rampart scandal that they bring up very fleetingly, that in itself is an interesting component that completely gets glossed over.
Yeah, I feel like this like a mini series to really dissect all the components, because again, if a person's not really aware, it just seems kind of like this movie or this story is about three corrupt cops.
Well, because you can't talk about any of these people on their own. They are inextricable. And All Eyes on Me about Tupac and the Notorious movie from 2009, none of those really work to me as standalone films. Even we just watched Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell, the documentary that just dropped on Netflix.
After watching this, I wonder if I was so unsatisfied with the Biggie doc on Netflix, because maybe due to legal reasons and it's an open investigation, they can't really talk about certain things, so it leaves a lot to be desired.
Right. Well, yeah, because that documentary, which was fascinating because you get to see, unseen footage of Christopher Wallace as a young man, and then at the end it's and he got murdered and blah blah blah. We all know how that goes, and because they what else can they say? Nothing, probably.
Speaking of the ending, the ending of this film sort of does the ubiquitous this is where these real life people are now, and then the final note is that more than 50% of African American murders are unsolved. I thought that was a really interesting statistic.
Well, which makes me think
not that it's not true. I don't know that it's not, but why? How does that relate to this story? Because really, this is a story about corruption.
Right. And about a very specific, high-profile case.
Yeah, because it's not saying that the LAPD as a whole was in cahoots with Death Row. It's saying that there were LAPD officers working for Death Row, and the implications of admitting fault would have been disastrous for the entity as a whole. But like you said, it's hard to just look at it singularly, because when we think about the LAPD throughout the 90s, it's just there are a lot of issues.
Well, it's just that seems like something coming from a white director that would feel okay tacking that on there. And yeah, we got to tack it onto this broader overview of systemic racism. And it's sure, but to me it
doesn't fit, because you're basically saying that these three black cops who were engaged in criminal activity and in cahoots with violent record executive, are responsible for the death of these two people. So what does that have to do with this bigger issue that you're not presenting?
And also, there's something else that gets glossed over that in the world of law enforcement is a big deal. Russell Poole, Johnny Depp's narration, says that, I was 2 weeks away from getting my pension. It's like, what exactly happens we just watched The Choir Boys, the Robert Aldrich movie, and that's all about these dumb LAPD officers that are doing all kinds of things they're not supposed to, but it's very clear that you need to make it until you get your pension. And there are just too many unanswered questions that...
Well, primarily for me, and I don't know that in the book, I don't recall because it's been years, except that I think it was really just about a detective doing his job. But in this film, it makes it seem like that he's made this his life's work. When it's like, well, for why? Why come? Why?
And that's who's paying you? What do you do? Where's your money coming from? It's just that it's like the star power is so great of Depp and Whitaker that we're supposed to be distracted from asking those kind of questions, maybe.
Anyway, what would you give this movie?
2 out of 5.
I would give it 2.5 out of 5. I did enjoy it, and I probably would watch it again.
It's enjoyable, but
but there are laughable moments.
There are too many laughable moments, and at the same time, they should have cast. It should have just been no names. This material,
yes.
There is an audience here that wants to see this, and there needed to be somebody else at the helm and as these two leads.
Anything else?
No.
Bye.
Bye.